camera if ever kaya sa ako ang internet. Kaya medyo hinay sa akong internet currently. Grabe og ping. Ang ping na sa mga 80 milliseconds, 80 ms. So, hinay kaayo. Okay, so we'll start our new topic, which is Gothic architecture. By the way, you have any questions sa previous topic na to? So far, wala ka? Let me know if you have questions so that we can discuss it a little bit and then check if unsa inyo ang mga nalibgan ng mga topics. Okay, so now we are on our second part of your Cluster 1 History of Architecture 2. So humana ang midterms, and I think ma-view ninyo inyong midterm grades by next week because our deadline for the midterm grade is actually this October 7, which is Thursday. So gamay na lang kulang, mao man ako og check sa tanan ninyo nga mga gipang submit. So for those who haven't submitted the skis 01 and 02, katong mga wakaabot sa deadline sa MS Teams nga assignments, kindly send it through Teams chat. I will still accept it, but I will impose deductions kay unfair sad sa uban na on time ni submit. But don't worry, those deductions are not that big nga halos wala na score ang imuhang effort. So I still accept it. So siguro until tomorrow afternoon siguro so that I can submit my grades on time. Okay, if you don't submit our grades on time, may deduction sa sweldo per day per subject. Ma-late me. Okay. So if you don't have any questions for our previous topics, we will proceed to our new topic, which is Gothic of architecture. Okay, so can you guys view my slides? Makita ra? Kindly thumbs
Yes,
up
sir.
if ever kita ra.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so our new topic is Gothic architecture. So balik ta sa atong mga previous na discuss. First, we discussed early Christian architecture. And then after that, we discussed Byzantine architecture. And then after that, Romanesque architecture. So that means on the midterm portion or the midterm part of our History of Architecture 2, Cluster 1, we've discussed 3 era of architecture: early Christian, Byzantine, and Romanesque. So again, if you will question, what is this line here? Kaning atbang aning Byzantine architecture. This is actually Islamic architecture. So it's not part of History of Architecture 2. Actually, it's part of History of Architecture 3, I think. Okay, so after Romanesque, that's the part we're in, Gothic architecture, which is our topic for today. So first things first, what is Gothic architecture? So unsa man ang Gothic architecture? So if we search Gothic and if we don't relate it first with architecture, if ato pa siyang i-relate with other aspects like the fashion, when we search Gothic or Goth or something related to Gothic, which is not architecture, we can see these examples na medyo black, dark, diba? Mga na ang mga Gothic fashion, diba? I think you've noticed this one. Nagali uban ganahan magpa-tattoo o Gothic art, and ang ilang mga tattoo is ingani siya, no? So Gothic or Goth is in fashion or in Gothic art, not related to architecture, is actually dark. And black usually black, and medyo for me sa ako, it's kind of scary tanawon ang mga Gothic art. But if we go deeper into architecture or in architecture field, Gothic architecture is actually the opposite. Dili siya dark. But actually, Gothic in architecture is actually transportive and ethereal. Or another term that we could associate with Gothic architecture is lifting the gaze of the viewer towards the heavens. So, example picture here, ingana siya, no? So again, no? Gothic architecture is transportive and ethereal. So meaning ana inigsod nimo mura kag gidala og another area. Ethereal is something like heaven like. Mura bag mura pa gi-elevate ang imong own self. So and then this one lifting the gaze of the viewer towards the heavens. So because later on we will know that Gothic churches, Gothic buildings are actually very high. So in terms of height, and compared to Romanesque architecture, Gothic architecture is actually very high. Like that one, no? So again, anong gitawag di siya Gothic architecture? Nga from the term itself, Gothic, it's kinda opposite to the root word which is goth. So nga nang gitawag di siya Gothic architecture. So ang nagpasiugdaan na niya nga tawo is this man right here, si Giorgio Vasari. Kani siya. So in Gothic architecture, at first, gitawag siya og French work. Meaning ana, during the Gothic period, during the time that they constructed Gothic churches, Gothic buildings, ang ilang design or ang ilang style at that time is not actually called Gothic. Wapas la kaila Gothic during the time na nag-construct sila sa ilahang mga churches. What they call sa ilahang style is French work because Gothic is mostly located in France. Ngadto nag-originate and then it radiates. Medyo nipagawa sa France and then it includes Spain and England. And apil na sad ang UK. So again, gitawag siya og French work. So when man di ay ni exist or ni pakita ang term Gothic. Gothic is a term used in reproach or a pejorative description to this style, meaning ana ilang gisaway. So kinsa may nagsaway? Actually this one, this guy right here. Si Giorgio Vasari. Why? During this time, during sa time ni Giorgio Vasari, actually this guy right here, kani siya, in the picture right here, he's an architect, painter, sa pa na artist, author, diba? So nanay tanan, no? This guy right here is actually a very big fan, or actually he's one of the proponents of the designs sa Renaissance architecture. Renaissance architecture, it's actually a revival of the previous art, the Roman architecture, and then they enhance it a little bit. So what they did is they really like their own style. Ganahan kay sila, which is it's the same siguro sad sa ato right now, di ba? If unsay imong gi-design, I'm sure ganahan sad kay kasi imong gi-design. So they really like their own style, and the previous style, which is Gothic, ilang gisaway. So they've associated the term Goth. Goth is actually a barbaric tribe in Germany. So that term Goth, ilang giname, or this guy right here, gives the name Goth-like or Gothic sa previous style, and then that term actually spreads all throughout Europe and wala na nausab. And that's the history. Why is it called Gothic architecture? Which is kind of opposite to the exact meaning of the term Goth or Gothic. Okay, so mo na siyang there's a very imbalance between the Goth art, the Goth na kanang fashion compared sa Gothic architecture. Okay, so hopefully na gets rin ninyo. Gisaway aning tawhana ang previous architectural style. It's because they don't like it. Mas ilahang i-preferred ang ilahang own style, which is the Renaissance architecture during that time. But actually, this discussion or our discussion right now is to discuss the beauty of the Gothic architecture. So this is from the Dictionary of Architecture by Dekichi. So what is Gothic architecture? So based on that book, it says here the style of architecture originating in France. So sa France siya, mo nang gitawag siya og French work. In the 12th century and existing in the western half of Europe through the middle of the 16th century. Characterized by the building of great cathedrals, progressive lightening and heightening of structure, the use of the pointed arc, rib vault, and also fan vault, and a system of richly decorated fenestration. So this four statements right here actually are the more distinguished part when you look at a certain building. More if makita ka building and then you would like to determine if it's Romanesque or Gothic architecture, this is the term na pangitao nimo like lightening, heightening of structure. Taas gani and then mas airy, mas musulod ang natural lighting. So that means Gothic architecture na siya. And if nigamit ka ng mga pointed arc, rib vault, and fan vault, so that means Gothic architecture na siya. And if mas grabe ang mga ihang fenestrations or may mga decorations, so that means Gothic architecture na siya. So again, don't forget this four. During Gothic architecture, they are characterized by building of great cathedrals, a progressive lightening and heightening of structure, the use of the pointed arc, rib vault, and fan vault, and a system of richly decorated fenestration. So for example, this one right here, so unsa man siya nga church, it's the Chartres Cathedral in Chartres, France. Uban tawag ni siya og Chartres, but the correct pronunciation is Chartres. Chartres is a place in France. So nag-build sila cathedral na to, so gitawag siya og Chartres Cathedral. So if you notice, grabe no, patas anay sila. If you notice the towers right here, if this one is Romanesque, ilan nang giputol somewhere here. And then nanay mga flat siya, dili siya yung pointed. And then here, very intricate rose window. If sa Romanesque ni siya, wheel window lang. It's not a very intricate part right here. And if you notice this portion, medyo gamay, but those are pointed arches or pointed arc. Okay, so nakita ninyo there, no? Pointed arc, revolt, lightening and heightening in terms of height, mas taas siya. Lightening meaning ana sa iyahang mga fenestrations, iyahang mga openings. Later on sa other side aning church, we can see how they created or how they designed their fenestrations, the openings for their windows. Okay, so Gothic architecture is actually a part of a medieval architecture. I think you're familiar with the term medieval. No? Ang medieval architecture is a architecture style wherein iyang gitapok ang from Byzantine up to Gothic. So based also in the Visual Dictionary of Architecture, mo na siya ang meaning sa medieval architecture. So the architecture of the European Middle Ages comprising the architecture of Byzantine, pre-Romanesque, Romanesque, and Gothic area. Nganong giusa man na siya? It's because if you notice sa area wherein this architecture exists, is actually adjacent to each other. Like Byzantine is in Byzantium, which is Constantinople, which is now the Turkey, di ba? Pre-Romanesque, which is the Carolingian, Ottoman, which is Germany, Italy, and so on and so forth. Romanesque, same gyapon, no? Italy, England, nagi pa mga Romanesque. And with the Gothic area, unsa gani ang mga countries na nag-cater sa Gothic era. We have the Spain, France, and England, but mainly France, gid siya. So this four right here, Byzantine, pre-Romanesque, Romanesque, and Gothic era are actually part of medieval architecture. So with this, we can say that Gothic era or Gothic architecture is the late medieval architecture. Siya na yung pinaka-last portion sa medieval architecture. And after the Gothic era, here comes the Renaissance, or what we call the rebirth. The meaning of Renaissance is rebirth. So later on, we will go on to that topic after Gothic architecture. So if you have questions so far sa itong discussion, kindly let me know sa chat. Okay, so what are the influences? So unlike from the previous architecture style, there are influences in terms of geography, in terms of geology. This one right here in Gothic architecture, those influences are actually very minimal in terms of the application of the style. Why? It's because they really wanted their buildings. Nagit sila a focused goal wherein they want a bigger windows, they want a pointed arc, they want higher churches compared to other architectural styles. So with those goals in mind of this era, those influences in terms of geography, geology, medyo dili na siya naghatag og dako nga impact. That is why the influences that we will discuss here are those that gives impact to the Gothic architecture. So here, first we have history. So during Gothic architecture, there are only three kingdoms left. So we have the France, England, and is Castile and Spain. So that is why all of the or most of the Gothic churches are actually in these three areas: France, England, and in Spain. But actually, there are also Gothic churches or Gothic structures in other parts of Europe, like in Italy. But those churches or those structures are actually mixed. Naimbitay ka ng it's a certain structure, pero gimix siya na Romanesque, then gimix o Gothic, and then later on, gi-renovate na mix na sad into Renaissance. So, bali nagalo-halo ang iyahang style. Kay medyo sa kadugay sa pag-build, naabtan na og from Romanesque nag-start, naabtan Gothic, naabtan naguba, and then gi-renovate, and then naabtan na sa Renaissance architecture. Okay, so give me 1 minute na kadali lang. Hello. Sorry. Nangayog gatas akong baby. I'm sorry for that. Okay. Hopefully you guys would understand. Ngayog gatas akong baby. Okay, so going back, in terms of influences, we have here first, we have the history. So only three great kingdoms were left. We have France, England, and Castile and Spain. And another one is most Europeans were Catholic at the time. So that means most of the structures built are actually churches. And church under the Pope brought Christians together. And then here, the rulers, the church, and the townspeople spent wealth on building more castles, cathedrals, and monasteries. And lastly, towns competed with each other to produce the best architecture. So these are the influences that greatly affect Gothic architecture. That is why in Gothic architecture, the churches are actually, in Bisaya term pa is pabunggahay. Murag panindot tayo og church in terms of height, patas anay og church. So the best church actually is in Gothic architecture. Ang pinakanindot nga church is actually in Gothic architecture. Nga naman, it's because again, most Europeans or most of the people within that area are actually Catholic. And then, since Catholic sila, and then they are under the Pope, so they build churches every town, every area na makita nila na pwede, they build church. And those churches are really, really high in terms of height and quite big in terms of its size. And the towns, those three kingdoms is actually nagcompete. France, England, and in Spain, they compete to kinsay pinakanindot church or have the best architecture or have the best Gothic architecture. Okay, so this one is an example. In Spain, the Leon Cathedral. Okay. Kay mostly man gud atong mga examples makita nato is from France, from England, but actually in Spain there are a lot of structures also that are in Gothic architecture or in Gothic style. Okay, so if we view the map right here, this one, the Ottoman Empire, actually this is the Germany area, which is Ottoman, that's from the Emperor Otto, no, or the Ottonian architecture. Here, the blue one, kaning portion here, these are the papal states or kanang control, actually di control no, but under the scope of the Pope. This one right here. So this one, France, nga rin originate ang Gothic architecture. And then it radiates, it goes to England, it goes to Spain, in Castile, Spain. And actually, abot sad sa Europe, other parts of Europe, and then here, actually this one here is Italy. So naabot sa na siya sa Italy. So nag-originate sa France ang Gothic architecture and radiates going up England, going right here in Spain, and also in other parts of Europe. But wala ka siya kaabot sa Germany. Mostly in Germany, though there are also Gothic churches in Germany, but mostly naay mga mostly in Romanesque or mga old styles sa German architecture. So how many years, pila day ka years na dominate Gothic architecture? So here it says nearly 400 years. The Gothic style dominated the Western Europe in nearly 400 years. So again, from France, goes to England, goes to Italy, goes to Spain, and then here sa Germany area and so on and so forth, wala kayo. But still nagyapo no, not literally zero, but there are also structures na influenced by Gothic architecture. So how about their beliefs? So unsa may ilang mga pagtuo during the time? So medieval man considered himself but an imperfect refraction of the divine light of God, whose temple on earth according to the text of the dedication ritual, stood for the heavenly city of Jerusalem. So mao ni ilahang belief during the time, no? Imperfect refraction of the divine light of God. So in Gothic architecture, ilang interpretation is, in Gothic interpretation of this point of view was a monument that seems to dwarf the man who enters it for space, light, structure, and the plastic effects of the masonry are organized to produce a visionary scale. So that's the effect of their belief. No? Grabe kataas in terms of scale ilahang churches, knowing one story lang ni siya. And then if you compare the man here, the people here, to the overall scale of this structure, it would say nga monument that seems to dwarf the man. So during that time, they create buildings na super monumental. So meaning it's very big in size, very in terms of height, so high that wherein idig musud ka, mura ka o wow, mura ka na sa pinakataas or heavenly space. Okay? So here, next, we have characteristics of Gothic architecture. So we have 7. Nanay mga 7 ka characteristics ang Gothic of architecture. Number 1, we have grand tall designs with increased height of towers. If you notice, Byzantine architecture is actually high, but they can't go high or they can't go much higher. It's because of the weight of the dome. They can go on a certain height, but they need a lot of another domes, which is what we call semi-domes, to hold those main dome. So I think part na siya sa atong midterm exam. Actually, ang nag-hold sa main dome are, aside from the pendentives and the 4 arches, another part is na siya yung mga gagmay nga dome on the sides. One side and another side. So, na duha ka buk semi-domes that would hold that main dome intact at the center of the structure. So when they tried to make their structure way higher, patasaan nila, that means katusang mga semi-domes mas mudako and then they need a bigger support. So in terms of height, they are quite limited. But here, in Gothic architecture, they can go as high as they want. It's because ang ilang patason is mostly ang ilang tower. It's not, although the building itself, the main or the nave or the main part of the church is high, but they make their towers much higher than their main structure. So later on, makita natin mga examples. Number 2 characteristics here is we have flying buttress. So we know that in Romanesque architecture, they have buttress. No? So if I may sketch a little bit, if this is the structure right here, so if mo na siya ang structure, in Romanesque architecture, their buttress is attached to the structure or to the church. Yan na siya. Iyang buttress. So meaning if you have this column, si buttress, which is the purpose of that buttress is to support or to give additional support sa column, ang buttress niya nagtapot. So directly within or adjacent or tapot gyud siya nagtapad sa iyang column na iyang gi-suportaan. While in Gothic architecture, their buttress are actually flying. It's not literally flying na naglupad, but their buttress is detached. Nasa layo. So if you view yan na siya, no? So ang ilang buttress, di palayo nila. So if you view the YouTube link that I forwarded, naangad to, i-explain nila why, and then later on ato nang ipangutana. Oh, supposedly today, but I think there are other students nga wala naka-join, no? So we'll just have it on the next meeting, ang atong mga question and answer portion based on that video. Okay. Number 3, we have pointed arches. So I think that in Romanesque architecture, mostly naka siya, round arch. But there are also parts wherein naka-pointed arch na sad ang Romanesque. That's what the late Romanesque is doing. Kanang padung na mag-Gothic architecture. But the early Romanesque, naka-round arc sila. And here, in Gothic architecture, naka-pointed arc na siya. So this one is Romanesque. This one here is Gothic. Next, number 4. Number 4, we have vaulted ceilings. So in Romanesque, vaulted gapon siya, but the vault usually is groin vault. It's because the arc that they use is round arc. Diba? So if you notice, naka-vaulted ceiling ang Romanesque, but the vault is groin vault compared to Gothic architecture. So unsa may ilahang vault nga gigamit? Usually rib vault, and then they increased in terms of artistic value. Ilahan ang gidungagad og mga pie, which is what we call the fan vault. But mostly, naka-rib vault ang Gothic architecture. So that's the difference between Romanesque and Gothic architecture. Number 5, we have light and airy interiors. So if you notice sa Romanesque architecture, the characteristic is kanang ngit-ngit siya, no? Ngiob. It's because of their small windows, di ba? And here in Gothic architecture, it's quite the opposite. It's light and airy interiors. Number 6, we have gargoyles. So later on, we will discuss this one. Kung saan meaning ng gargoyles. But I think you have an initial meaning na, no? Or idea what is gargoyle. And lastly, number 7, emphasis on decoration and ornamentation. So again, no? Number 1, we have grand tall designs with increased height of towers. Number 2, we have flying buttress. Number 3, we have pointed arches. Number 4, we have vaulted ceilings. Number 5, light and airy interiors. Number 6, we have gargoyles. And number 7, we have emphasis on decoration and ornamentation. Okay? So ato ni siyang isa-isahon, no? There are examples each and every characteristics that we have. So for number 1, grand tall designs with increased height of towers. So these new design elements allowed for redistribution of weight, so towers would not crash themselves. So ingani siya, no? This example right here is actually the Canterbury Cathedral in England. So later on, I will share this file para mabasa ninyo ang kaninga portion nga medyo gamay. But if I may read it, Canterbury Cathedral in Canterbury is one of the oldest and most famous Christian churches in England. It forms part of a World Heritage Site. It is the cathedral of the Archbishop of Canterbury, currently Justin Welby, leader of the Church of England and symbolic leader of the worldwide Anglican Communion. So this one, if you notice, ang iyang mga tower is higher, way higher compared sa kaniyang iyang main portion of the church, which is the nave, no? Or the main portion of the church which covers the nave. So nga nang ilang magipatasan actually. And then this one, if this is the tower, napagid siya mga ginagmay nga mga towers right here. So what is the purpose of that? Actually, aside from the goal wherein to reach the sky or to have it way higher than any structure that they have on that area, actually this part right here is actually for the weight distribution. Murag although murag initially if magpataas kag building, medyo in terms of weight medyo mas makabugat siya. But if you put this part right here, these spires right here, they recentered the center of gravity. Murag if you have a center of gravity at the middle of your church, so that means tanan nga force is going on that center. Murag tanan nga weight is going on that center. Like for example, the dome. The dome is the central part of the church in Byzantine architecture. So that means all the weight is going on that central part. Pa-dome siya ngadto. But here in Gothic architecture, they redistribute the weight. So there's a weight in here at the center, another weight right here on the two towers on the main entrance. So that means ang weight sa structure is not fully focused on the center part, which is if magkataas imong building mo na siya magka-cause of collapse. So what they did is ilang di-redistribute into certain areas or certain spaces. Okay. Here, another example right here, we have the Salisbury Cathedral in England. So if you notice, na siya central tower which is so high. Wala na siguro na tawo nga ring a portion, no? Wala na tawo nga makasulod somewhere here, but I think somewhere here napa na siya. And here, if you notice, na siya mga small towers right here, na siya mga ginagmay nga towers, just to redistribute the load or the weight. So if I may read here, Salisbury Cathedral in Wiltshire, England, is probably the most famous for its cathedral, also known as Cathedral Church of the Blessed Virgin Mary. This is the site of Britain's tallest spire. So this is what we call the spire right here. So mo na siya pinakataas in British or in Great Britain, as well as the world's oldest working clock. So ang iyang clock hangtod karon is nag-work paghapon. So gitawag siya og the world oldest clock, which is 800 years old. Kanang mga clock bitaw nga dagko kay nga makita nimo sa ilahang kanang church. Number 2 characteristic is flying buttress. So if you notice kanang na mga arrow right here, the red one and the yellow one. So those are the flying buttress. Don't mind the term flying. It's not literally flying, but actually the term flying is, it means not attached to the building. It is detached right here. Actually, if you watch also the video, the purpose of this is to redistribute the load. Kay before, if I may sketch it, hopefully ma-follow rin nyo ako mga sketch, no? Hindi kay siya hopefully informative gamay, but if this is the roof, and then mo ni siya imuhang walls, in churches, in old churches, the weight of the roof is actually carried by the weight of the walls. So if makabantay ka na itong mga church gani, although it is made around 1900s or early 1900s, ang atong mga walls sa churches is grabe ka baga. Why? It carries the weight of the roof. So mo nang baga imuhang mga walls, and also at the same time the columns and the piers. So what if imo pag ginang patas-an gumayo imuhang church? So if we go higher, sa imong patas-an nimo imuhang church, like patas-an nimo imuhang nave part, high ceiling ang imuhang church, what would happen? It would create a very tall and very thick walls and very big columns. So during Gothic, since ang ilahang goal is to make their cathedrals and buildings higher, what they did is they integrate the use of flying buttress. So this flying buttress is actually holding this portion of the church right here, kaning upper portion. They hold that portion, including the roof, in a way that these walls right here could now be thinner, mas nipis compared sa Romanesque architecture. So that's the use of flying buttress. Hindi lang kay, ganahan na sila nga pina-fly. So there's a reason behind why they create a design like that. So it's just the same with our designs right now, no? If maghimo na mo design sa inyong design subject, make sure that each element that you've incorporate in your design has a purpose. Dili lang kay wala na sir, char lang na sir, or for aesthetic value. So it's always, or find a reason wherein it serves its purpose. Dili lang kay for aesthetic value and then nindot kag facade, dili lang kay nga na. It should also have its own function. Same here with Gothic architecture. They've created this flying buttress actually as a additional support and also makes their walls thinner kay gi-carry na sa flying buttress ang loads sa roofing. Okay, so here in this example, this is the St. Vitus Cathedral in Prague, Czech Republic. So the Metropolitan Cathedral of St. Vitus, Wenceslaus and Adalbert is a Roman Catholic Metropolitan Church in Prague, the seat of the Archbishop of Prague. Okay. Another example, which is very, very familiar to you guys, this one, the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris, France. So I think nasunog na siya. Medyo heartache during that time kay wala pa ko kasuroy in this area of Europe. Actually, wala pa ko kasuroy Europe. Nasunog na ang pinakanindot nga church. For me, pinakanindot na church is the Notre Dame in Paris, France. And hopefully, currently, ilan na yung gi-reconstruct. If you notice na yung mga scaffoldings, no? They try to reconstruct it. And I don't have a copy of the plans if unsaon nila forma. And I'm hoping that they would reconstruct it on what it should be or what it is before. Dili kay buhatan nila glass domes and something. And kay medyo maguba ang culture or ang history sa church. Hopefully they would reconstruct it in a way na same gyapon sa una. So if you notice, the flying buttress of the Notre Dame in Paris, France. And here we have a big rose window and all of the fenestrations or the openings which is in pointed arc. So again, because of the flying buttress, they can create their walls thinner, and at the same time, they can provide a lot of openings. Gano man. Wala naman kayo gi-carry sa wall ang weight sa roof. The weight of the roof, the weight of this part right here of the structure is actually carried by the flying buttress. So that means, ang wall, it is safer to them to punch through para makabutang sa ilahang mga fenestrations, windows, rose windows, pointed arc, windows here in glass finish. So ano na sila, stained glass finish. If you notice this one, naka-stained glass na. Number 3. So our third characteristic is the pointed arches. So pointed arches is much more supportive than round arches and gave the illusion of pointing towards heaven. So again, if you notice, nagya po nilang term, they really have this idea good in Gothic architecture na tanan nila nga buhaton is really for God. No, tanan nila is kanang pataas para pointing towards heaven. Their openings dapat naka-point towards heaven. So that's their style of architecture during that time. So here, there's a term right here. Pointed arches are actually more supportive than round arches. Why? So if you noticed here, this pointed arches, once you put the center part, which is what we call keystone, these parts of the arc actually is supporting itself na. Unlike the round arches, nga ang keystone, once na ay maguba gamay sa keystone or maguba gamay sa other parts of the arc, very, very delicate ang round arches. So again, nagya po na siya sa video. If you would click on the link, nagya po na siya the difference between the round and pointed arches. Number 4, we have the vaulted ceilings. So again, no, distributed weight of floors and weight above. So this gave an increased impression of height and magnificence. So here, naka-rib vault. So if you have this type of rib vault, and then makita nimo na yung mga ingani, no? Itawag siya og quadripartite rib vault. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Quad meaning four parts. 1, 2, 3, 4. Tawag siya quadripartite rib vault. Diba? From the term itself, quad, which means 4. Quad means 4. Quadripartite rib vault. Number 5, we have light and airy interiors. So we have taller ceilings with larger windows than prior buildings. Could support slate roofs to keep interiors drier. So this example right here is the Cologne Cathedral in Germany. So Cologne Cathedral is a Catholic cathedral in Cologne, Germany. So again, no, dili lang kay sa France, Spain, or sa England na yung mga Gothic architecture, but still niabot gyapon sa Germany. And this one is actually one of the best churches in Germany, ang kanisiyang Cologne Cathedral. It is renowned monument of German Catholicism and Gothic architecture and was declared a World Heritage Site in 1996. So if you notice, grabe ang pagka-monumental ani nga building. If you notice, naay sa picture, I think naay siya, if we zoom in, naay yung mga tao, no? But if you notice, pila ni siya ka meters high, kapilaon ang tao para makuha na siyang full height right here. So they really go into light and airy interiors. Compared sa Romanesque na medyo dark, diba? Solemn ang Romanesque style, dark. It's because what they did is gagmay ilang windows, and then ang ilahang interiors are very dim, ngit-ngit. But contrary to that is the Gothic architecture, which has light and airy interiors. Number 6 is gargoyles. So this one, kani siyang mga pictures right here. These are examples of gargoyles. The main use of gargoyles is actually rain spouts, or sa ato karon gitawag na siya downspout. Also meant to play into superstitions of time and scare people into seeking refuge inside churches, especially lower class. Before manggod, I don't know if tinuod ni siya, but they said that only those members of that congregation can enter the church. Dili bitaw para sa karon nga the church is open to each and everyone nga mosulod sa church. Before, they made their churches, and if kinsay member ana congregation, if mora say makasulod sa churches. So those lower class nga dili pa Catholic, dili mora pa wala pa sila religion, if moadto sila og mga churches like this, makita sila na yung mga gargoyles which really looks ugly like this, medyo mahadlok sila because they don't know the meaning of this art or design right here. But actually, the main purpose of gargoyles is actually downspout. Why? Since they are areas in Europe that also experience rain, if they don't have these downspouts, the rain will actually seep through sa ilahang structure. Diba? If we go back a little bit, here, no? Sa kaning mga structures right here, they made it into stones. So when they create the stones, sila nang placed with mortar. So stone and then mortar, stone and then mortar. And then when they created this part right here, nanay mo certain portion na medyo flat, and then ngadto magtapok ang water, or ngadto magstay ang water. That is why there are portions, especially mga corners, they provide gargoyles, or what we call the rain spouts, or atong term karon is downspout. so that those stagnant water nga magtapok on that portion will be thrown out. Malabay ra nila. And it will not stay within the structure and makes the structure more cleaner and durable. Kay when we create building, one of our main enemy is actually tubig. Kana mag-create with structure, even though right now, kana mag-create kag balay, one of the main nimong kontra is actually ang tubig. First is roofing. Diba? Sa imong roof, dapat walay mag-leak. Next is imong CR. If nakay CR sa second floor, dapat walay mag-leak sa ground floor. Diba? So, another thing is kanang imong counter sa kitchen. If na mag-leak sa counter sa imong kitchen, wa ka ba nga imong mga cabinets below or ano na day, guba na day, it's because of the leaking. So, dili na karon before they also experienced the downside of water within your building during the Gothic architecture. That is why their solution is to provide gargoyles. So, medyo ano lang, artistic lang sila pagkabutang sila ang mga gargoyles, ilang downspouts. Pwede ba ta mo gamit ani karon? Why not, di ba? Pero basig mahadlok lang kasi imong kagalingon nga downspout. So might as well use the proper way or the kanang mapalit ra sa hardware nga mga PVC pipes. Ano diso-diso pa man imong self na mag-carve ka og may ngani nga mga downspout, di ba? Okay, so ingani no, ina mga downspouts. Ngani forma. Siguro daghan sila time sa una no, wala pa guro TikTok before or wala pa Netflix. Ilang lingaw is to carve these gargoyles. Okay, so we'll have a 8-minute break para inom tag tubig, water break, toilet break. So we'll be back at 6:45. So next na to nga i-discussion is ang number 7 nga characteristic of Gothic architecture. If you have questions, just let me know. I-chat lang here sa atong MS Teams. Okay, so kuan sa ta guys, snack sa tagal. Hello, hello. Manamog nakasnacks na mo gamay guys. Okay, so continue ta ha para mahuman nato no. Actually, we're quite behind with our schedule. Siguro mga behind tag mga two two meetings. So I'll try to cope up and probably by next meeting we'll have our GOTHIC and then we'll start another ano na yan, another topic para maka-cope up ta. Because the modern architecture is actually part of history too, and it's one of the areas in history of architecture nga daghan kayong pwede ma-discuss. Actually, daghan kayong pwede ma-discuss sa Gothic architecture, but mas daghan pag yun for the modern architecture. And also, dili lang sad kay ang modern, but Renaissance architecture is really quite good. And also silang tanan nindot man, but um, sa modern architecture nindot kayo i-expound further pagid ang idea. Okay, so we'll start na. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. And if I know the answer, I will tell it right away. But if wala, I will research for it. Okay, so the seventh one is emphasis on decoration and ornamentation. So here, in these two cathedrals, the Cologne and the Salisbury Cathedral, you can see the decoration or the ornamentation. Before Mongod, especially in Byzantine architecture, they don't have this kind of statues. What they do is mostly on frescoes because there's a part in Catholic or in Roman Catholic, in Christianism, uh, dili pa kayo okay ang mga statue. There's a time na medyo bawal pa ang statue. But here, during this time of Gothic architecture, nga rin niyag start ang using of these statues, kani siya, mga ilahang mga decorations and ornamentations. So they have heightened, meaning ana is kanang ila pang gipadaghan, heightened emphasis in buildings looking good, not just being functional. So all of the areas in the building are with decoration and ornamentation. So we cannot say na simple, 'di ba? In Byzantine, in Romanesque architecture, they have rich interior but they have simple exterior. Here in Gothic architecture is the contrary, opposite. Opposite kayo, no? In their exterior, they are very well decorated, full in terms of ornamentation, not just in the exterior but also in the interior. So mga naning ang mga tao aning mga aning time medyo dagan silang time to sculpt and also to have this masonry because most of these are masonry constructions. So ilahang mga masons or ilahang mga mason sa una is really quite good and really skilled. Okay, so we have 7. So going back on that slide, sa 7 kabo, here we have the grand tall designs with increased height of towers. We have flying buttress, pointed arches, vaulted ceilings, which is naka-rib vault, light and airy interiors, gyrogols, which is used as downspout or rain spouts. Number 7, emphasis in decoration and ornamentation. Okay, so next. Any questions so far? Next, we have building types. So we have these 4 building types. We have the cathedrals, abbeys, and monasteries. We have also hospitals. We have royal palaces and also castles. And we have town houses. So these are the building types present during Gothic architecture. We have cathedrals, abbeys, and monasteries, hospitals, royal palaces, and castles. And the fourth one, we have townhouses. But mostly, during Gothic architecture, they've created cathedrals, churches, abbeys during this time around. Gamay lang kayo ang mga hospitals. Though na yung mga royal palaces, but mostly cathedrals, and abbeys. So here, examples of these building types. Here we have, first one, we have the cathedral. So these examples right here, I have 8 examples. So based on that site that I've visited, I think a week ago, they've created this top 8 most beautiful cathedral in Europe. So top 8, pero wala na siya gi-arrange in order. Ilalagay ko og unsa ang top 8. So the first one, we have the Amiens Cathedral in France. So Amiens is the tallest completed cathedral in France, reaching an internal height of 138.8 feet. It is also the largest interior volume at 260 cubic yards. Medyo lisod siya i-compute, no, kay naka-English system. I myself are not quite familiar if inon ko 260,000 cubic yards, I cannot really imagine kung saan siya kadako. Unless if square meters di siya i-convert into square meters. And also the feet, I'm not that familiar if pila ka o kung sa kataas ang kaning 138 feet. And here, second example of cathedral, we have the Notre Dame in France. So, mo na siya katong nasunog, actually. So, the kings of France were crowned in this cathedral, and then it is constructed during the 13th century on the site of an old church dating from the year 400. So, before, na din siya karaan nga church, pero karaan na kayo, year 400 pa, 400 AD, and then they reconstruct it, and then mo na siya. Na-create na nila ang Notre Dame sa France. Another cathedral, another example, we have the Basilica of Saint Denis in France. So France gyapon, if you notice, most of the cathedrals are actually in France. Noted as the first Gothic cathedral, so first ever Gothic cathedral, which is completed in 1144. If you notice, at this time around, 11th century, Romanesque architecture pa ang uban. Kaya na nag-start man ang Gothic architecture at 12th century. So this one, in between 11 and 12th century, nahuman na ni siya nga cathedral or this Gothic cathedral. So that means, completed siya on the 1144. That means constructed pa siya way prior. So that means this is the first Gothic cathedral that it was completed in 1144. So again, the name of that cathedral is Basilica of Saint Denis in France. So if you notice, ang yung interior is light and airy compared to Romanesque architecture, which is dark and then solemn, di ba? Kaya ang Romanesque architecture, magod, if we remember the term sober and dignified, that means medyo intimate ang iyang space, medyo darker ang iyang space. Next, we have the Chartres Cathedral in France. So again, France gyapon na siya. So this UNESCO World Heritage, do you know UNESCO man, di ba? UNESCO is a more part siya sa UN, United Nations, but focuses on education, science, and cultural. Wait lang. UN is siya, United Nations. ESCO is education, science, and culture. Ano sa ang O? UNESCO. Education, Science, Cultural Organization. So this UNESCO World Heritage Site is extremely well preserved. Nearly all of the original stained glass windows are still intact. So kanang mga glass nga naa diri is just the same glass windows, the same glass material wherein mo'y gamit nila before or unsa ilang gi-install before. Little of the building has changed since the early 13th century. So that means what they did before is actually that durable and long-lasting. Ay wala may change. And hopefully it will be preserved for more years to come so that if we have time and funds, we can visit this one, guys. Hopefully, no, nindot kayo nang maka-tour ta within the Europe. No? And one way, ang classmate, naka-tour siya within Europe is actually because of a Catholic congregation. Murag naay uh, murag naay event nga gipa-travel sila within Europe, and what they did is nag-visit lang og mga cathedral. No, kanindot ana, di ba? So hopefully makatry sa dana po. Another example here, this one, it's quite controversial, but I'll just discuss it. Another example of cathedral is this one, Santa Maria del Fiore in Italy, which is actually, it is known as the Florence Cathedral in Italy. This cathedral actually starts construction during the Romanesque. So naa siya yung Romanesque na style. And most of the construction kanang sa mga sasulod sa iyang structure happens during the Gothic architecture, during the Gothic style. And most of the finishes katong mga si Brunelleschi, if you later on ato na siyang mag-ilhan kinsa na siya nga architect, which is mo na naghimo sa kani nga dome. That time is Renaissance. So meaning this church is actually Romanesque, Gothic, and a Renaissance church or architecture. Okay, so better known as the Duomo, Florence Cathedral is renowned for its incredible dome built by Filippo Brunelleschi. While construction began in 1296 in Gothic style, the structure wasn't complete until 1436. So the multicolor facade you see today was completed in 1887 in the Neo-Gothic style. So later on during the Renaissance, we will fully describe this church and the architects that made this church. But mo na siya yung history. It started, actually this one kaning began in 1296, napagid na siya previous nga ilang church nga ilang gihimo during the Romanesque. So from Romanesque, Gothic, and then nahuman siya during the Renaissance period. The next one is, kanina, very familiar sa ato, the Westminster Abbey in London. So Henry III, king, ordered the construction of this abbey in 1245. As he chose the spot for his burial, so it's now the site of the British coronations and many royal weddings. So makita kag mga kanang mga royal weddings nga rin gina usually yun sa Westminster Abbey i-held. Okay, so most recently the marriage of Prince William and Kate Middleton, now the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge. Kalimot ko kinsa tong bag-ong kasal, but I'm not that familiar sa ila, but katong mga nag-follow nila nga mga prince and dukes, I think you're very familiar with them. Naganit ang girl kay nasa Suits nga series. The next example here, we have the Canterbury Cathedral in UK. Okay, so United Kingdom, dili siya France, but still they have this Gothic cathedrals. So in Canterbury Cathedral, it's one of the oldest and most famous Christian churches in England. It forms part of the World Heritage Site. It is the cathedral of the Archbishop of Canterbury, currently Justin Welby, leader of the Church of England and symbolic leader of the worldwide Anglican Communion. Another one we have here, the Milan Cathedral in Italy. So nga rin na usually kanang na maglupad-lupad nga mga dove, di ba? And then kanang mga movies na magilak-hilak na rin usually na. So I think katang sa Milan nga kang Claudine Barreto man siguro to siya, no? I think nga rin gitong ilang pinaka usa sa ilang mga spots during the movie, katong pag-shoot nila sa movie in the Milan Cathedral. So the largest church in Italy took nearly 600 years to complete. So yan nakadugay ilang pag-build sa church before, no? Yan na moabot og mga 600 years. So unlike most Gothic cathedrals which have two towers in front, makabantay mo na yung mga tower in front, duha gina usually. Here, in Milan's cathedral has quite a different silhouette, being covered in many small pinnacles. So later on, we learn those terms, natin mga terms about Gothic architecture. So for an advanced info, this part right here, kaning mga ginagmay nga mga tower, Those are what we call pinnacles. Ano siya? Pinnacles, pinnacles. And this Milan Cathedral is the only cathedral that has the most number of pinnacles. I forgot that the number, no, but later on, sige, I will research on that. I think during our board exam, nigawas ang how many number of pinnacles does this church have? I mean, they describe the number of pinnacles, but ang naasa choices is unsa nga church, or ang question is unsa nga church, and the nasa choices nga to is ang Milan Cathedral. So another building type is actually hospital. So here, this asylum here is what we call the Magdalene Asylum in Cork, Ireland. Actually, this part right here, you can fully see the Gothic art or the Gothic architecture, but this is actually on the late Gothic part na siya. But they constructed this during the Gothic architecture. So if you noticed, ang iyahang height, they have towers also, and then in terms of height, medyo taas siya compared to just the ordinary hospital buildings or asylums. But today, it's listed as the one of the scariest building in Europe, this one. So ayaw nag-i-appeal if you would want to visit Gothic structures in Europe, ayaw i-appeal sa inyong bucket list ang Magdalene Asylum. Kay basig, makulbaan mo. It's one of the, kasi siyempre asylum, di ba? It's one of the scariest structure now in Europe, this one. Another building type is a town hall. So town hall here in Leuven Town Hall in Belgium. So if you notice, grabe no, kataas. No? In terms of height, and if you notice the ornaments, very, very well ornamented, well decorated facade. Kani siyang nasa center ha, mo ni siya ang example, dili kaning duha. This one at the center. Another example for the building types are palaces or palace. So this one is a Parliament of Normandy, also called as Parliament of Rouen. So this one is in French flamboyant style. So later on, we will learn what are those styles what are those styles that belongs to Gothic architecture. Because in Gothic architecture, na siya gitawag og mga two styles. We have the English and we have the French. And each one of them, the French and the English, napo na siya corresponding styles after. So later on, we will learn on that. Okay, so again, what are the building types? We have the churches, monasteries, abbeys, we have hospitals, we have town halls, and we have palaces or castles and castles also. So here in my next few slides, we have here Gothic versus Romanesque. So these are representations ug unsay difference aning duha. How would you differentiate Gothic versus Romanesque? Okay. First, we will discuss layout. So here on top is the famous Romanesque church, which is the Church of Saint Sernin. And here below is actually the Amiens Cathedral, katong gipakita ganina. So in terms of layout, here, both of them are actually cruciform in terms of their layout. Naka-cruciform siya. But here, in Romanesque architecture, the way is it done is this transept right here is way, way more closer to the apse. But still, naka-cruciform siya ang iyang style. Here in Amiens Cathedral, still cruciform. Dili lang kay maklaro, sir, o asa ang cruciform there, but cruciform diya po na siya. But the transept is actually now at the center of the church. So here, if you notice, the transept, this one right here, is not at the center, but it's more of a closer area to the apse. This one right here. But in Gothic churches, in Gothic architecture, their transept is actually at the center of the church. So gitawag na siya og regular cross plan. Kay before man good ang Romanesque architecture, if I may sketch. Romanesque architecture is we have this apse right here. We have the cruciform, which is the transept. Medyo dako lang sa other side. And then we have the nave. Na. Mura mag t-shirt, no? But yeah, mo na siya, no? Naka cruciform nga forma, but it's not the regular cruciform plan. But in Gothic architecture, they have the apse right here, but they extend it, extend, and then they have another extensions right here, and then this is their transept. Sorry, na yung mga gamay extensions right. And then nave. So mo na ilang transept. So this is the regular cruciform plan. Their transept is actually at the center of the church compared to Romanesque architecture wherein their transept is actually nearer to the apse. Okay, so that's the difference between Romanesque layout compared to the Gothic layout. Here, naman day plan nga rin, no? Nag-sketch pa ko. Here in the floor plan, so ingani siya, no? Ingani forma. Here, this is the transept right here, and this one is the apse. So if you notice, the transept is way closer to the apse. But here, in the Gothic architecture, the transept is at the center. And then iyang altar is actually kaning naa sa center. This one right here. Compared to Romanesque nga naa nga rin. So that means gamay ra dis lang masulod, no? This one right here. Mo na lang ni ang iyang mga ang iyang nave part is right here. And then we have the aisles right here. Compared to Romanesque architecture, that the nave part is actually this long. Okay, so what else po ang sarap makita? Okay, so here in Romanesque architecture, if you notice, they have a rectangular part and then the square part. And here in Gothic architecture, na yung mga XX. This X portion right here actually represents rib vault. If tanawon nimo siya, murag naka-reflected ceiling plan ni siya. This X actually the rib vault. And what do you call this part here? Quadripartite rib vault ni siya. It is composed of 4, if I may zoom in. It is composed of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Pero bitaw naghimo kag rectangle and then you place an X and then you now determines the center point of that rectangle and then you can have or you will have a 4 triangles. So that is a quadripartite rib vault. The next one we have Gothic architecture versus Romanesque architecture in terms of facade. So this one here we have Church of Saint Cerny. I think this is the example wherein I ask you to determine what are the parts, diba? If you notice sa inyohang midterm exam, so na siya'y tympanum, but actually this one wala siya'y trumo. This church wala siya'y trumo. Na siya'y wheel window, but this wheel window is not rose window. This is just a simple wheel window, but this one right here is actually the rose window. And here, if you notice, it uses a round arc compared to the facade of a Gothic cathedral or Gothic church, which is actually a pointed arc right here. And all of the designs right here is in pointed arc. Pointed, naka-pointed arc. Compared to this one, ang iyang fenestrations is like a round arc. And here, if you notice, there are a lot of openings. Openings here, openings here, openings. But in Romanesque architecture, the very minimal in terms of facade openings. Only the rows, or I mean the wheel window, these small windows right here to have a natural light within the area. And wala na. Actually, these are doors naman. But here we have a lot of openings, and so on and so forth. And if you notice the order during the Gothic architecture is very, very intricate. Here, kapila na nagibalik ang ilahang arc, or this one. And then kapila na siya nag-order. And then if we can view this part here, the tympanum and the trumeau, this tympanum is actually very well decorated. In terms of its ornamentation, grabe kayog mga sculpture. Compared here nga very basic ang iyang tympanum, and then wala gani siya trumeau. Another comparison is on the buttresses. So here, same church, Saint Cyrene in Romanesque. The buttress is abutting or attached to the building. Compared to this one in Amiens Cathedral, the buttress is actually flying. So naka-detach siya, which is called a flying buttress. Okay, so here again, from the term na naka-buttress siya, that means abutting this column or this building right here. So tapot, no? But here in Gothic architecture, the term is flying buttress. So detached from the building itself. Another part is the windows. How did they introduce their windows? So same church gapon, Church of Saint Cyrene versus the Amiens Cathedral. In Church of Saint Cyrene, their windows are quite minimal. So one window right here, and then anay mga ginagmayng windows. And then their windows are not consistent in terms of size. Na dako, say mo gamay nga rin, gamay dako na sad. Balik nandiyan na sad nga rin, no? But compared to the Amiens Cathedral, their windows are quite high and quite open. So airy, light and airy. Siya, no? And if you notice here, the vaulting, this is what you call the rib vault. And notice the walls right here. The walls are quite thinner compared to the Romanesque architecture. Next slide, we have interiors. Okay, so I don't know if this is picture, I don't know, adjust the picture, but this is what gives a more theme in terms of Romanesque, which is dark siya. And for the Gothic, it is light and airy. So makita niyo mo, no? It's because here in Romanesque architecture, naka-barrel vault and then minimal windows. So wala kay windows on this part, which gives the structure very minimal in terms of natural lighting, and gives the space a very dark. Not that so dark, but kind of dark, wherein morag gives the sober and dignified style. Compared to the Gothic architecture, they provide a lot of fenestrations on this part of the structure. Through the use of flying buttress, nipis na ilahang mga walls, nipis na ilahang mga columns right here, ilang mga support. So they can make their structure a lot higher and provide a lot of openings, a lot of fenestrations. So it will give a very light and airy interior. So here on this slide, the tympanum. So here, the tympanum of the Church of Saint Cyrene. So nga ni siya, no? Though there are sculptures, but it's quite minimal compared to the tympanum of the Gothic architecture. So if you notice here, this is the tympanum, kaning portion. And then this part right here, ang order niya, napagyapoy mga details. So these are the orders of that church. Okay, so if you have any questions, do you have any questions? So this is my second to the last slide. We have here this one, no? Various Gothic styles. So mo na siya akong giingon, no? In French Gothic architecture, we have early Gothic, which occurs in 1130 to 1190. And after sa early Gothic, we have the High Gothic, which is 1190 to 1240. And after that, we have this Rayonnant Gothic that occurs during the 1240 to 1350. And lastly, we call this late Gothic or the flamboyant style, which occurs during the 1350 to 1520. So if you notice, kani siyang late Gothic or the flamboyant style ang pinakadugay actually na style sa Gothic architecture. So again, no, Gothic architecture mostly French, mostly located in France and England. But there are Gothic churches or Gothic structures also in Spain. There are also Gothic structures also in uh, Germany and any other areas in Europe. But mostly kanigid silang duha ang nag-compete during the time because they really compete on who has the best or who has the better architectural design. So if naigihimo ang France nga nindot nga structure, nindot nga Gothic church, i-compete sa na siya during the sa part sa England or sa English. So for the England or on the English Gothic architecture, Gothic style, we also have the early English period which occurs during the 1175 to 1250. Ang ilang second is, if you notice here sa Gothic, gitawag siya High Gothic. Here we have the decorated period, so which is 1250 to 1300. And the third one, perpendicular period on the 1350 to 1400. So wala na siya ay late English style or late English Gothic style. So again, take note of this various Gothic styles. We have the French, we have the English. So French, France na siya ng mga Gothic styles in terms of architecture. And here we have the English or the England nga Gothic architecture. Okay. So this is my last slide, but I will show you some examples of this French and English Gothic styles. So I'll just unshare this one and reshare my other file. Kindly wait for a minute lang, no? I will find that file. Wait lang ha, medyo loading pa sa ko ang pag-open sa akong other file. Let me know if you have questions. If you have questions, just type in sa chat or you could ask it directly. You can open your mic and ask it directly. Just a ano lang, comment. Some of you guys get a high grade during the midterm exam part 1 and also part 2, daghan sa mga nakakuha sa mga explanations during the part 2. And sa part 1, I think nakita naman mo sa result, di ba? Mostly, na yung mga uban nga there are questions there that actually there's a portion nga, like for example, gibutan siya, which of the following are not. So make sure nga basahan niyo maayo ang question, because that manner of kanang questioning is actually ingana ang board exam. Kanang sayon siya, but actually naangat to sa question itself ang medyo tricky part. And then sa choices, you should know how to eliminate a certain choice. Like for example, no, which of the following is the blah 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 of Zara? So if you don't fully know the answer, look at the choices. So choice number 1 or choice A, if kabalo mo eliminate, if kabalo mo unsay meaning ato nga choice, and then feeling mo dili gini siya mo ang answer, so eliminate that choice na, and then proceed with another choice, and then up to moabot ka sa point nga okay, murag I think this is the best possible answer na pwede for this question. So inga na ang manner of answering. Dili kay familiar ko ang question, and then I know kanigi siya ang answer, but naday sa bottom part sa question lahi day iyang gipangutana. Okay, so ano lang siya, palipat, murag malipat ka sa question, and then with the manner of questioning, malipat ka, and then it might get you a wrong answer na noon, and then sayon ron ta kayo ang question. So inga na ang style sa board exam. For history, theory, and other subjects composed of around 100 questions. Dili siya exactly 100 no, sa among time 108. Sa sunod na mo kay I think 106 ila no. Dili siya exact. Pero katong more than 100 dili siya bonus actually. It's really calculated based on the number of items. Medyo wala lang yun, medyo naghang lang gid ang ako ang PDF pag open. I think here, I think na. Okay, so nanay nakita guys? Na nakoy gi-share. Na, okay. So this one, these are examples of the early French Gothic. So this one is the Abbey Church or Church of Saint Denis. So katawton napakita ganyan na Church of Saint Denis. It's actually early French Gothic. So kinsay nag-design ani niya? It is designed by Abbot Suger. Another example, High French Gothic. So we have a lot of examples, but this one we have the Chartres Cathedral. We have the Reims Cathedral. This one right here in the picture is the Amiens Cathedral. We have the Notre Dame Cathedral. So much of the 1200s, mga church nga gipang construct during the 1200s, those are the High French Gothic. Meaning, murag sa Tagalog pa nga term, kasagsagan sa Gothic architecture in French, that most of their cathedrals were constructed during this time around. So tall cathedrals that focused on artistic imagery as well as height. So actually tanan nga mga cathedrals nga rin, ano siya ang mga best churches in Europe, which happens during the High French Gothic. So here is an example, the Chartres Cathedral. So if you notice, dili balance ang iyang ano guys, no? Dili balance ang iyang tower. So here, taas iyang spire right here. This one right here, mubo iyang spire. Actually, na siya background. I'll discuss that one in my in our next meeting. Kani siyang background. Say background aning nganong dili siya exactly the same design. Di siya balance in terms of this tower and this tower. So another example of high French Gothic. So this one is the same, no? Ang iyang portal. If you notice the ornamentation, the statues. This one, the tympanum, if you notice, and the order. It is very highly ornamented in terms of sculpture. Kaya hindi pang butang. So the way they introduce their glass, so gitawag siya stained glass. So nga na, no? They have very, very high, big window openings, and they've covered it with stained glass full of representations of the religion, which is Christianism. So in terms of plan, this is the plan of the Chartres Cathedral, which is high French Gothic ang iyang design. So again, if you notice this part right here, the transept is at the center of the church. Cruciform in terms of plan, and this transept is located at the center of the church. So if you ask what are these lines right here, those are the rib bolting or the rib bolt. This part right here. So sa exterior, sa Chartres Cathedral, so mo na iyang exterior. So you have this rose window right here. Tanawon nimo siya, mura siya og entry point, but actually this is the secondary entry point on the transept. Mo na siya ang transept. This is the apse with all the flying buttress. This is the nave right here. Mo na siya ang nave with also all the flying buttress. The narthex is actually here, galing nga parts sa ilang entry. But this one, nasa sila entry along the transept of the church. Okay, so these are they also have frescoes. Aside from sculptures or sculptor, napod sila yung mga frescoes within the building. So this one, during the High Gothic, na makita niyo siyang Bible of St. Luke. For the rayonnant in French Gothic, rayonnant meaning light. So placed emphasis on more light at windows. Even though ang High Gothic is actually daghan ng windows, in rayonnant French Gothic, mas ila pag yung gipunan. So it's actually meaning ang rayonnant means light. Okay, so actually it's time na we will continue this one on our next meeting. Okay, so I'll stop sharing and hopefully ma-view ang ato ang discussion sa others because currently we are only 27 and there are others who can't attend due to internet problems, medyo uwan sa other areas. In outside from Cebu, I think may taga Masbate or other areas na affected sa ulan. No? Nasa uban taga Samar affected sa ulan. So kindly inform them to view the recordings, and I will also share the slides that I presented, so you can browse it at the same time viewing the recording. Okay, so if you don't have any questions, we will end our online meeting, online discussion here, and see you guys on our next meeting, which is this Thursday. So for those who haven't viewed the video, the YouTube video that I shared, kindly do so because we'll have a short question and answer wherein you will use your laptop or you will use your phones by Thursday. Okay, so thank you everyone and have a good day. Have a good night.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
Thank you,
you,
sir.
and keep safe.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Thank you, sir.